1983.
Yeah.
1983, you say?
Yeah, 1983 was an awesome year. Okay, I graduated high school, so
the reason you bring up, the flashback to the 80s, which I was in 84, so is that was the year that the Minnesota AIDS Project began here in the States, and we just happen to have them in the studio, Colleen.
Yeah, we do. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hello. And Chelsea, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Woo!
Yes, and Michael Radke is in the house. It's been forever and a year since you've been here, so it's good to have you here as well.
It's good to be back.
Yeah, so one of the reasons that of many, what they do is definitely relevant to the things that we discuss regularly here, but you're also charity partners, and, they touch on a lot of issues that are near and dear to your heart as well, Colleen.
Yeah, we had, we were at Crypticon, and we have a prize wheel. And the staff decided that we should do the prize wheel for good.
Okay.
And we contacted several folks in town and said, we would like to donate money. And Minnesota AIDS Project said, we would love your money.
We always love money. Yeah.
And it was nice because I think they understood. We actually had some folks turn us down. They were, yeah. It's very interesting. I got turned down for a Christmas kids charity once. I was going to donate gift cards, and they just didn't want. And I'm like, oh, come on, people.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm going to go with we're not going to get turned down.
Yeah.
And then we're going to do it again at the one of the next events we do. They already have a
Cocktailian, right?
Cocktailian, no. See, they already have someone that they have to work with, so we're going to do that. But when we come up, we decided that Pride is going to be a fundraiser also. And it has been insane at our wheel there. So we're looking forward to that in June. It's going to be a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
But what I saw here is when I was going through it, and I was going through the website and doing all that, is that I have to admit, my brain was a little bit stuck in the 80s, about what's happening at Minnesota AIDS Project. There was so much new stuff.
Yep.
So what's different between 1983 and 2006? There we go. I'm just going to throw it out there.
I like it.
Yeah, I was excited when I was at the website. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. So one of I think the biggest impacts is that, now people living with HIV aren't necessarily dying of HIV-related complications anymore because the treatment has gotten so much better. But it is still a lifelong chronic health condition. So, we still have, to educate people about it because it's, you still have to take medication for the rest of your life. So we do. Chelsea and I are the community educators at the Minnesota AIDS Project. So we do a lot of educational outreach, educating people on HIV, ways they can protect themselves against it, different steps they can take, and then also services for people living with HIV, because it is a long-term chronic health condition. There's a lot of kind of issues that intersect with it, and MAP does have a lot of those, preventative programs, and then also services for people living with HIV.
Yeah, I'm guessing that it's not inexpensive to have any chronic lifelong disease, and you're going through there. So it's nice to know that there's services there to support you when you're looking for something. And I also noticed that there's related here that there's a couple I saw needle exchange, which really caught my eye. Is that related to? There's a very large heroin epidemic and stuff going around that way with people sharing needles and everything, because that's made a lot of the news. And I saw the news, I said, well, that's got to be somehow tied in.
Yeah, for sure. Sharing syringes is, it's the second most common way that HIV is transmitted, but it's by far the most efficient way that HIV is transmitted. So it's just really the most cost-effective measure to prevent transmission for people who use syringes for whatever reason, whether it be injecting drugs, hormones, etc. So it's, and I think you're right with the heroin epidemic and the opiate epidemic. That's been, a very like visible issue lately.
HIV itself is a pretty fragile virus, but when it's inside of a syringe, because that's like a vacuum, it can live for 5 to 7 days. So it can live for a really long time in a syringe. And if people are sharing syringes, like Chelsea said, that's a very efficient means of transmitting the virus. Sharing syringes is also one of the top ways hepatitis C is transmitted as well. Hepatitis C can live for, I think, what is it, like 9 weeks in a syringe?
Yeah,
a really long time.
Right. So someone who might be, just not even using the syringes properly, but not disposing of them properly, it could end up someplace that they don't know.
And that's the important thing about the syringe exchanges. It's both sides. It's getting those used syringes disposed of correctly and out of the community, in addition to giving people new sterile syringes to use.
Okay, I'm just going to stop everybody just for a minute. I know this is we've been waiting a long time to get you guys here in the studio, but I want to back up and community educators for MAP. I'm just curious. I'd like each of you, Zack and Chelsea, just to kind of tell us how you got where you are and into the positions that you hold there.
Yeah, so my educational background, I actually majored in gender, women, and sexuality studies. I went to the University of Minnesota, and one of the things I was really passionate about is these huge healthcare disparities, particularly healthcare disparities in the LGBTQ community. And HIV is one of those things where there is some pretty big disparities. So after I graduated, I actually worked in human resources for a while.
How'd that go?
I got a lot of experience talking to people about really sensitive subjects like their paychecks and benefits and things. And then eventually I decided I wanted to do a more social justice type role, feel like I was doing more of a positive impact in the community. So MAP had an opening, and I, somebody who I'm really comfortable speaking in front of audiences. I'm comfortable talking about sex and drugs. So that's how I ended up at MAP.
And how long have you been there?
Since last September, so about a year and a few months now.
Okay, what about you, Chelsea?
So we actually have fairly similar backgrounds. I also graduated from the U of M, Twin Cities, and I minored in gender, women, and sexuality studies. I was a political science major. I had several different detours. I worked retail a lot. I worked in the beauty industry for a while, and I just realized, kind of similar to Zack, I had to get into social justice and feel like I was actually doing something with my life and making a difference. And sex ed, I've just always been a really big sex ed nerd. It's always been one of the biggest passions of mine. So, yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard that strung together that way before. Have you? Sex ed nerd.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a new one. I like it.
No, that works for me. I like just going through there. No, that's fascinating because I'm out. We're out there sort of in the retail land, trying to explain to people that it's okay to enjoy sex, but you got to do it correctly. But to get it from the point where you're dealing with even more sensitive issues. I scratched the surface. You guys got to go really talk to folks. When folks are coming in, do you guys have to once they finally give you a call, are they ready to hear what you need to say, or do you have to work around it?
I think it depends on what context we're doing the education in. I think if people are coming to us or coming to one of our classes or calling us on the AIDS line, et cetera, they're really willing to listen most of the time. We do a lot of education experiences where we go to treatment centers, for example, and it's a requirement in Minnesota that people going through chemical dependency treatment get some HIV education. So they're not necessarily listening to us because they want to. And then it can be a little bit harder to get the message across. But I do feel like people appreciate it for the most part, because I think a lot of times this is the first time they're hearing this information. People aren't great at talking to others honestly and openly about sex and drugs, etc. So I think they really appreciate the education.
Yeah, and I think there's just a lot of myths and misinformation and just vagueness about HIV, and the education we provide is very, very specific. We talk about, the specific, most common ways people get HIV. We talk about specific bodily fluids because, sometimes it'll be, well, HIV is spread through bodily fluids. And then people are going to think, well, saliva. Well, saliva doesn't spread HIV. It's spread through very specific bodily fluids. And I think people really appreciate the frankness when we talk about it. You know, we don't really tap dance around the things. We say biologically correct terminology, and we're very specific, and we are very open to answering questions. And like Chelsea said, a lot of the times we might sometimes be the first person somebody maybe felt comfortable asking questions about, you know, sex and drug use and stuff about.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of going back. Colleen sort of touched on this, but I mean, I think for a while, once the medications and the treatments got so good or improved to the extent that they did beyond, you know, a complete death sentence when, you know, 20 years ago, whatever. I mean, it feels like HIV and AIDS got kind of forgotten for a while. Talk about that a little bit and why it's coming back around again to be discussed because it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right on the nose. Once you know, it stopped being a death sentence. People stopped dying from it. It just kind of fell out of the public eye. You know, like you said earlier, stuck in the 80s. Like, that's a pretty common thing. People are like, we really have to worry about this still? I thought that like went away in the 80s and 90s, and it makes our messaging a little bit difficult because, you know, we don't want to fear monger. You know, we don't want to be like, this is the scariest thing that could ever happen to you. But it is still a chronic, lifelong illness. You know, yes, you can live a full lifespan with it, but you don't want to be on medications every single day for the rest of your life if you can help it. So it's still something that, you know, there needs to be education. It needs to be talked about.
Yeah, and I think with the education people have received, a lot of it is stuck, you know, in the 80s, some of those early myths. The biggest one dealing with, it's something that only happens with gay men. But then Chelsea and I go in and we talk about how, you know, the most common way it's spread is anal, vaginal, and oral sex without a condom. We don't specify, you know, the genders of the partners, and people are like, oh, I've had vaginal sex without a condom. I may have been at risk. So I think we see it... at least in the work Chelsea and I do, it's something that people, when we come and, like, I know for me, it's like, oh, here comes the gay guy to talk about AIDS with us. And then by the end of it, they're realizing, I, like, may have put myself at risk. And it's, you know, it's something that they do need to think about because, you know, sexual health is part of overall health.
Yeah, I've noticed that it used to be that condoms were funny. You know, because, you know, you know, people would, this hasn't happened in years, but someone would send us like a condom stuffed in a walnut and say, here's a funny gag joke. And we're like, I mean, it might have been funny in 1985 when people were like needed to be humorous about condoms to get people to do it. And we used to have a whole wall of them. And now we just sell them as I mean, like, people are more comfortable buying them at just Target. They've got the 24 packs. You know, it's going through there. Why do you think? I mean, why do you think that there seems to be a resistance to still not using a condom? I mean, it's not. You know, it just seems. I don't sell them anymore because it seems ordinary. But then I hear that there's still a lot of people. I mean, we sell some, you know, but we don't sell like this. You know, we used to have like this huge, like 8-foot section of every condom that there was. You know, like 20 years ago, and now we sell them as a convenience. But now, you know, I'm just to do it. Yeah,
birth
you know, but. But I go to Walgreens, you go to Target, you go to CVS, they've got a huge display, and yet I'm hearing that the folks are still not using them. I mean, how do you get folks to go, yeah, I'm that person that should be using them? I mean, are there a particular, I mean, I know that the chlamydia has gone up and gonorrhea and syphilis and stuff like that. Is it sort of tied into that? I'm not sure if I'm making my point here, but it just...
No, I understand. Yeah. I get it. Yeah.
I mean, I definitely think that, like you said, like all STIs are on the rise. I think there's a lot of different facets as to why people may not be wanting to use condoms anymore. I think a lot of it has to do with education. I think a lot of times if, like, one partner is on birth control, they're like, oh, well, we're having protected sex, and that's really the only thing that, like, heterosexual couples particularly sometimes think about. Yeah.
Well, and I know for me, it's amazing. Like, sometimes when I'm doing education, people will share what their, you know, sexual health education experiences were. And a lot of it was very heterosexually focused, specifically pregnancy focused. And, I'll go to a place and, I'll do my, presentation, and they'll be like participating, sometimes cracking jokes. Yeah, we're talking about sex. He said anus. Ha ha ha. But then at the end, I'll show them how to actually put a condom on. I'll do a condom demonstration with a dildo, and you could hear a pin drop in the room because nobody's ever actually told them this is how you put it on. And yes, there is an incorrect way to use it. I know one thing Chelsea and I do is we very much take a harm reduction, motivational interviewing perspective. So we talk to people sometimes who just are not going to use condoms, period. We tell them, it is the most cost effective, really one of the most effective ways you can prevent HIV and STIs, and they're just for whatever reason won't want to use them. So rather than like shake our finger at us and at them and shame them, we talk about other ways they can reduce the risk, like going on PrEP, the pre-exposure prophylaxis for HIV. Using lots of lubrication so there isn't damage during sex, getting tested and treated for STIs regularly, because if you have an STI, it does increase the risk of getting HIV. Basically, we try to help people find what will they be willing to do to help reduce their risk.
Judging by the amount of lubricant we sell, I would say that a lot of folks might be taking that one piece of information.
Well, too, I mean, we've talked about this numerous times, and Michael, I know you've been here too when we have, that there has been a rise in age categories, cultural pockets, and parts of the country in STIs, because education, I think for the reasons we were just talking about with HIV and AIDS, they got so under control for a while that people stopped talking about them and being aware, and they're coming back up. Can you guys talk about different segments of the population, be they age, cultural, or otherwise, and what your observations are here in Minnesota?
Yeah. So there's several, like you said, several different demographics that are experiencing like disproportionate impacts and disproportionate rises in new cases. As far as like age brackets, what we're seeing for all STIs, including HIV, young folks like 13 to 24, and then older, isn't it like 55 plus?
Yep.
Which I think is just really interesting. Those are where we see the biggest increases in new diagnoses. And I think the biggest thing, I think it all goes back to like the education for young folks. I mean, there's so many issues with, sex ed in schools, but for older folks too, I think it's just not talked about like at all. They just assume either, older folks don't have sex, so they don't need to, worry about this. Or, once you have menopause and nobody can get pregnant, like you don't have to use a condom anymore. And then you hear these like horror stories of like chlamydia running rampant through, a senior living facility or something like that. So I think it's just not spoken of, and people aren't aware that this is something that they need to consider in their lives.
And there's definitely big gaps in who healthcare providers are talking to about something like HIV. One thing that I've experienced quite a bit, and Chelsea, you may have experienced this too, is if I do a presentation and there are women in the audience, I've had them say, well, my healthcare provider said, well, you're a heterosexual woman, maybe you're married, you don't really need to worry about HIV. You don't need to get tested for it. How
did Magic Johnson's wife find out? Hello.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. And stuff like that leads to these huge health disparities, but by the time they get diagnosed, they maybe have progressed to an AIDS diagnosis. They're having severe complications, to the point where Chelsea and I actually developed a training called Women in HIV, because there's these who, being a gay man, I go to the doctor for a cold and he talks to me about HIV, but then my brother's hasn't been brought up. And it's just really interesting, these gaps of who's being educated on these things. And that's why, Chelsea and I, we talk about things in terms of risk behaviors instead of risk groups, because, it's nothing necessarily to do with identity. It's the behaviors you engage in. And there's definitely groups, like Chelsea said, that are disproportionately affected. But really, like I said earlier, the number one way people are infected is anal, vaginal, and oral sex without a condom. So when you say that, like I said before, vaginal sex is a risk. Like, we go to this group that's older men, and I come in and, they're like, oh, this isn't really going to apply to me. Then I say vaginal sex, and they're like, what? Vaginal sex. Just got real.
There's another particular group or risk behavior, I should say, rather, that has seen like it when we got the 2015 updates for Minnesota on new diagnoses. Among injection drug use population, the new cases of HIV rose 86% from the year before. So, but there's definitely like the opiate epidemic, heroin epidemic. So it is that too. But there's also been a lot of funding towards testing that population specifically. Mm-hmm. So part of it's like they're just testing more, so they're catching more cases. But they're also, I think it's a combination of both. There are more new cases in that population for sure.
Yep. And just to highlight, with statistics, it's important to understand those numbers are people who have been diagnosed. It's not new infection rates. There are people living with HIV that have not been diagnosed, so they're not going to be included in those statistics.
Yeah, I mean, when you don't, and especially, like you said before, if you didn't have information before, you just had some anecdotal or just one or two doctors groups that were doing stuff, and then suddenly everyone's doing it, things are going to spike. Mm-hmm. So
exactly,
the next couple of years, we'll be able to see what's actually going on with numbers.
Mm-hmm. Well, and here's one, because, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, and God knows 50 Shades of Grey had something, brought this really into the popular conversation, I think even more. I mean, anal sex has become more prevalent in the heterosexual population. And Michael, I swear, when we first started doing the show, it's been almost 2 years ago now, I was asking Michael, like, what surprised him about his job, because he's been with Fantasy Gifts for a super long time, and like everybody else that works there, loves engaging with the customers and helping them get what they really want and need for happiness and whatnot. But I said, well, what surprised you about people? And he goes, straight women and how much they love anal sex.
They do.
Remember that?
I was surprised, but a lot of my friends, they're like, oh yeah, I love anal more than vaginal. I'm like, okay. And then educating the guys about the prostate and everything. A lot of heterosexual guys are now finding out that special spot. And it's like, okay, yeah, I want that.
So I guess my question is, with that sort of becoming more popular, have you guys noticed anything from your vantage point, about that in the heterosexual population? Has it made an impact that you have noted?
I guess I haven't seen anything like particularly attributed to that. I have like heard, that is a trend. Yeah, that more heterosexual couples are engaging in anal sex, and I think, if they're just kind of trying it out for the first time, they may not know, okay, you got to use a lot of lube. Like, you can't be super forceful at first. Just because, if blood happens to be present during sex, that, like, drastically increases the risk of transmission for HIV, et cetera. So, you just got to know what you're doing. Prepare, get some lube. So, yeah.
That's one of the things that we've always had an issue with sometimes that folks will watch a movie, think that that's how it's supposed to be, and they forget the prep work that goes into it. And when we've had movie stars and adult movie stars on and conversations, there's like, there's a lot of work before all that. And folks don't know that. And I know that, Minneapolis high schools, at least the school or whatever that my kid went to, they did show them how to put a condom on a banana, but I'm pretty sure at no point did they say that lubrication is needed during certain things.
They're never going to talk about anal sex at the high school or middle school sex ed level.
And that's what we found when we had a sex ed instructor in from Normandale, is that by the time the folks get there between like 18 and 24, they're always trying to, when he's trying to have a lecture, he's got to sort of fill out a survey beforehand to find out where to start. Because everyone is all over the things, especially with different cultural biases towards everything too, trying to get the information across to folks that, just refuse to believe that it might happen to them.
Yeah, I think that's another thing too. I remember being a teenager. You think you're immortal, like nothing. It could never happen to you. It can happen to everybody else, but it's never going to happen to me. So, yeah.
Well, what is it that I see? I'm looking at outline here, and we talked about groups and Hep C and everything sort of. So what have we missed I mean, what are folks? I mean, like I said, if someone is listening, wanted to have someone come in to like hire, I mean, have you guys in? Do these contact contact you at Minnesota AIDS Project or the company there? Is it like organizations that call you or individual folks? I mean, how do folks get information from you?
Yeah. So for like organizations that want us to come out and speak to a group, I'm actually the contact person. And you can just call MAP and it'll end up in my voicemail or email through the systems that be. In terms of individuals, they would be referred probably to the AIDS line. Chelsea actually works on the AIDS line. I used to be on the AIDS line. It is the statewide resource hotline for HIV. And what I really like about a hotline is that, it is anonymous, but you get to talk to a real human. And we also have an online chat service for that as well. So, if people have questions about HIV, questions about where to get tested, they want to know about a risk they may have had, that's a really good place to have that kind of almost like a one-on-one educational session.
I love the fact you can talk to a human.
Yeah, that's great.
So rare these days.
I know, I'm so tired of pressing.
Well, and we're
sometimes.
like, please call, people will Google stuff, and anybody can write whatever they want on the internet. And it's just like, please call us. Or they'll read something like, their symptoms might be flu-like symptoms. And then, there are people who, anytime they have flu-like symptoms, they think that means that they got HIV. And it's like, please call us and we can make you feel better. If you want to get tested, we get people calling the AIDS line from everywhere, like
international people.
Yeah. And we're just like, well, let's find a place for you to get tested. What's your zip code?
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah.
You know what I really want you guys to talk about, and I'm just going to throw my own self under the bus and admit that I know very little about Hep C. I mean, we see it kind of in the news, and now we're seeing commercials, and it's really interesting. The people that they feature as affected, like they've got different ages, different, whatever, by hepatitis C. I really don't know anything about it. And I wouldn't be surprised if there aren't others like me. And just because you mentioned it in your materials, can you guys just give us a primer on that?
Yeah. So hepatitis C is a virus. It is a blood-borne pathogen. So it is spread through blood. It is a very strong virus. It's much, much stronger than HIV. It can live much longer outside of the body. What's interesting about hepatitis C is everybody experiences a different disease course, and it does, attack the liver. It causes the liver to be inflamed. So, people might not have symptoms and complications for as long as 40 years for hepatitis C. That's actually one of the reasons why the Centers for Disease Control does recommend baby boomers get tested. Actually, the median age is, I think, 56.
Okay. Wow.
It
And
was brought up for me my last physical or something like that. They took out a bunch of blood and did a whole bunch of different stuff just because the age group I was in. Yeah.
Yeah. And the number one way it's spread is both sharing syringes as well as other drug use equipment. Anything where there could be a small amount of blood present, whether that's cottons, tourniquets, water, whatever people are using. But the flip side of that is, it's not a common way it's spread, but it can also be spread through if people share toothbrushes or a razor, because there could be a small amount of blood present, and it's a very strong virus. Do you have anything to add, Chelsea?
Yeah, I think when we were talking about anal sex earlier and not losing enough lube, etc. It's hard. I'm still not sure whether I technically want to classify it as an STI, but if there is blood present, then it can be transmitted during sex. Mm-hmm. So that's why, it's always important to, use a condom, especially if your partner is menstruating or there's tearage or any blood present whatsoever.
Now, there are different types of hepatitis, correct? Am I getting that? It's going through there?
Yep. So there's both viral and non-viral hepatitis. So hepatitis itself just means inflammation of the liver. Mm-hmm. And so anything that could cause inflammation of the liver could be called hepatitis. So the ones with letters attached, so hepatitis A, B, and C, those are all viruses that cause inflammation of the liver. They are different viruses, but they cause that same thing. And then there's the non-viral forms of hepatitis. So this is like alcohol-induced hepatitis. There could be immune-induced hepatitis, obesity-induced hepatitis, so other things going on not caused by a virus that could cause the liver to be inflamed. Hepatitis A and B both have vaccines. And those vaccines have been very effective at reducing the number of new infections, but hepatitis C does not have a vaccine. And it looks like because basically we can't become immune to hepatitis C, our body can't learn to fight it. Even there is a cure for hepatitis C. It's a very expensive medication.
What's that new one they're advertising on TV, right? I've seen those.
But isn't it like $100,000?
Yeah, it's
or something?
very expensive, and even if you are cured, you can be reinfected too. So
God.
yeah,
That's terrible. Okay.
No, because I remember, like, I'm pretty sure I've had my kid get a crap ton of shots. I'm like, which one? Which one was it?
So I had, in my earlier years, I had the hepatitis A and B shot. Is that lifelong, or do I have to repeat that anytime soon? Because it's been like 20 years since I've had that shot.
For hepatitis B, and I don't know if this applies to hepatitis A, Zack.
I only know about it for
For
B.
B,
Yeah.
You should get a booster shot every 10 years.
Every 10
I would
years?
go in
I'd
and
probably
get a
check
new
that
one.
out,
Yeah.
yes. Good advice. Thank you.
Wow. Well, let's if you guys are game, we always have to talk about some of the things, sex and studies that have reached the news that are pertinent. We'd love to have you guys just chime in and add your 2 cents, if you will. First, I need to start with something that happened on the phone on my way in today. And he wouldn't care if I threw him under the bus. My friend Brian has joined us here on the show, and he's a realtor, and he came in to talk about advertising as a gay realtor. And like what that's, like.
That was a fun one.
Well, yeah, he's hysterical. And he called me and I said, well, how are you doing? And he goes, well, I'm fine, except for my lender saw me naked this morning. And I'm like, what happened? And it was an accidental, he was doing something on his phone and it was an accidental FaceTime that she made. And because he was already playing with his phone, he answered it butt naked. And they both went, ah! And I'm just like, oh my God. And you know what? I can't even tell you how many times I've accidentally hit FaceTime. I am shocked we don't hear about this more often. Aren't you a little bit? Because of how easy that is to do.
What I tend to do on my phone, maybe because of my age or something like this, I just tend to like delete shit that I don't want to delete.
Oh, is that your biggest?
I think I may have turned the camera off or done something. I went through my phone and I turned off so much stuff. So most of the time when I want to use something, it's like, it won't allow you. I'm like, because I think I'm too afraid of doing something like that. I'll play on my phone in the tub. I don't need to accidentally call anyone.
I've definitely accidentally FaceTime Chelsea, and I'll be like, oh shit, I meant to call her. hang up.
I've scared the living bejesus out of my boyfriend because I've accidentally FaceTime and then he'd pick up the phone and there's my face and he's like, ah! Like he wasn't expecting it. But yeah, Brian, butt naked this morning. Good job, man. That was just too good not to throw him under the bus. Thanksgiving weekend, people mostly kept their clothes on, which I know. I was thinking, come on, I was expecting some food stories.
Well, if they were smart, they did what I did, and they wore nice stretchy clothes, so they didn't actually have to unbutton anything. You just elastic waist, dressed up like I was. I came prepared to shovel the food into my face, and this is what we did. And be comfortable because I did most of the cooking too. Mm-hmm. And then you got to be comfortable when you're napping. Who wants like the jean button digging India or anything? No, comfy clothes. Definitely. So maybe that's why you're already comfortable.
I was expecting some naked turkey stories and some very inappropriate things with mashed potatoes, but nothing. I looked hard.
Sure you did.
Yeah, I really did. So, especially the cranberry sauce, that could have been a fun one as well. But there was an accusation that CNN, and this comes via, how when we all have different cable providers. Did you hear about this?
Yes.
Zack is cracking up. This one, supposedly CNN, and this got public due to a tweet. And what area was it? I think it was the Northeast. But this one company, BGR, which is a cable provider, or RCN rather, allegedly, it was supposed to be CNN News, but it was porn for 30 minutes.
What?
They're denying it publicly, but there were still shots put out on Twitter of it.
Yeah, I just don't know. I don't understand how in the year 2016 that somehow the buttons for the porn aren't really separate. For the buttons for everything else.
Right, yeah.
At least it was CNN and not like Nickelodeon. Because and the fact too that most of the time, I mean, hell, anyone can, the cable late at night, they don't even have like soft anymore. It's on there. You can get to it. It's a, you're like, really? Here, it's right here. And the names come right up on the menu. I mean, you can see like.
My husband blocks that for me. It says block. I'm like, damn it. What's that password?
The only other that's hysterical. He's childproofed you.
Yeah.
The only other hysterical aspect of this story, and they're still disputing whether or not it's really true, but what was supposed to be on wasn't just straight news. It was supposed to be Anthony Bourdain's Parts Unknown.
Oh. Actually, I'd be more upset if I missed Parts Unknown.
That's funny.
When I wasn't feeling well pneumonia, I was binge watching that, and I'm like, I want to go there, and I want to eat that, and I'm like, I have to stop watching this because all I wanted to do was eat food, and of course, there's nothing in my house, so all I'm doing is shoving in like noodles, which is not good. Oh, that looks good. I'll go make some noodles.
Well, I thought this was interesting, and it's a minor news item as paparazzi kind of stuff goes, but I was surprised to see Madonna's name pop up. She's been somewhat not loud lately,
I know.
amazingly, but she made a little bit of news for taking time on Thanksgiving to go to an LGBTQ youth facility and spent some time, and she took her kids and hung out. And this is a place that, helps them with homelessness and tries to get them, back. Maybe they've been thrown out because of their gender issues or because they're gay. And she sent out a really, really long tweet on it. It's kind of endearing and a little un-Madonna-like because the last few years of custody and whatnot haven't been exactly flattering. But I don't think that's why she did it. I'm not accusing her of that. So I thought that was kind of cool.
That's very cool.
Yeah. So, Mad Magazine, are any of you guys fans? Or is that just too old for
I
all
used to
of you?
love Mad Magazine.
Maybe too old. Okay.
You two were like, what?
Like what?
I used to watch the show with my dad. Mad
There was a
TV
magazine,
and Star Trek.
yeah. And then the back page you flip to make something totally different.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Anthony Newman pictures are always kind of hysterically funny. Well, they did, they've done a, how the People does the Sexiest Man Alive thing. They did a parody using President-elect Trump to win the title of Most Sexiest Man Alive. They had to, tweak it just enough to not get in total trouble. But they went downtown bang and in their usual kind of sarcastic snark, whatever. But what they did is they put all the, or snippets, I should say, of things that he said about women, really snotty, awful, horrible things that he's been soundly condemned for on the cover, Most Sexiest Man Alive. And then they juxtapose it. So they just went boom right after it. You can look at that'll be on newsstands on the 13th. You can look for that. I have something here that I'm trying to send to Megan. It's not what it is, it's where I found it. Okay. I will admit that I can't believe I'm going to totally admit this. Okay.
I love that look.
Publishers Clearinghouse, right? They always show the people getting like bazillions, and they're always opening their trailer door. And so, you never know. And now they're going to have a mansion and shit after this, right?
I would build a room just for the large check.
I know.
I thought about that. I would have somewhere. I wouldn't want it in the regular. There would be just a room for the large show check.
So for a couple of years, I will just enter. You can do the online thing, but the thing that you don't realize is they are aggressive. They will spam you, and and I'll play with it. So like they want you to search. They're trying to be a search engine, and I'm sure it's connected to some sort of sales, whatever. So I'll search just completely off the wall stuff just to bug them and mess up their metrics, all the time. But they're always trying to get you to buy something. Imagine my surprise when I see this totally nude aerobics DVD mixed in between the cheese slicer and the really barfy Christmas sweaters and other 4 payments of $9.99 shit that you don't ever want. Yeah, totally nude aerobics.
Are you on it right now?
I am not kidding you. 4 payments each of only $3.99, and it says, welcome, 2 hours, by the way. Welcome to Totally Nude Aerobics, a place where exercise and erotica become one. Prepare to sweat. Prepare to get pumped up. Step into the world of Totally Nude Aerobics. And the... Yeah,
well, I mean, really, I'm sorry. Well, the photo of it reminds me of the cable aerobics from the 80s.
Jane
I don't know,
Fonda, baby, right there.
There was just like, I don't know how to explain it, but there would just be like filler, and there would be the big hair and the shiny tights and the high cut leotard, and there was always lots of camera angles with thrusting asses and some boobs, and it was just fascinating. So maybe while they were filming that, there was another circular stage going on, because that picture looks right out of the 80s.
Well, and the Thigh Master. I mean, I'm sorry, but this shit was all like hinting at fantasy gift stuff, but only not half as fun or as efficient. So this is, I don't know. I mean, Miss Megan, as everybody that listens to the Sexcast knows, she will publish the links to not only how to reach out to guests or the organizations that they represent, but also to all the stories. And this one is new. This is something I haven't seen, the Vulva Gallery. Okay.
Yeah, is that canoe in it?
No. There was
someone who carved a canoe, and the top part of it looked like a vulva.
And it got confiscated in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I
remember that.
Yeah.
See, I love it. They follow the same news we do. This is an illustrator out of Atlanta. Or no, I'm sorry. Her name is Atalanta. Hilda Atalanta. I'm sorry, she's not from Atlanta. I don't know where the hell she's from. What am I doing? But she is really... I looked at the pictures. I have to say... Colleen, are you okay? She is really upset at the surge in the last decade of labiaplasty and all of the cosmetic work that women are doing, because she wants, kind of like the Love Your Melon people, trying to make everybody be okay being bald if they're going through cancer treatment. She wants everybody to love their vulva. And she makes all of these pictures. And you know what? If you didn't know what they were, like, you'd be like, oh, modern art. That's really interesting. But she's got a million of them. And this article it's got like 30 different pictures.
So it's an online gallery, or does she have is she doing this digitally painting, or is she doing canvases? They exist that way. But all I'm saying is this particular article has just a boatload of them that you can peruse. And so hopefully Megan can put it up. I don't think it can get filtered out, because it's not immediately obvious unless you know what you're looking at. So it's really interesting, and she's really trying to get people okay with their junk. And I'm all for if someone really wants to change their nose or get a bigger boob. I can't really say no, because I don't know what's inside their head. But if you're talking about, something like, I don't understand that one. I don't understand the that just seems like an area that I don't want something sharp. Maybe it's my own biases.
That's right on my realm.
But it's not particularly into the view. I don't know.
Well, you don't have to see it.
Yeah, I heard stories that like girls in high school are getting this done now, and like younger and younger. And I'm all for plastic surgery, like you said, do whatever you want. But I
think that I don't think there's really a reason. Look. Clothing is made for people with a reasonable amount of boobs. Okay, if you've got a nose that is much larger than the other features on your face, that's fine. You get mauled by a dog, get your face fixed or something. But there's nothing about that isn't just society image driven. There's nothing. My earlobes are uneven, and it's weird with a haircut. Sure, we'll fix the one ear, but
I'm cross-eyed my whole life. I'm gonna get my eye fixed. That's my demonstration there.
This idea that there's this perfect, vulva out there, but there isn't. It's,
But if you guys read the article, it's a pretty good article. And the lady, I applaud her. She sincerely, this is a true cause, for her. She says, the quote was, "I don't want people to undergo these, draconian procedures just because they want their vulva to look like the ones they see on the internet." Well, you can argue about liposuction and other things. Body shame has been thrown in our face and different. Now it's just making its way into the nether region, so to speak. Speaking of that, this just, because it's a bodily function, I couldn't stand it. I had to bring this up. NASA, of all things, they are actually putting out a contest. This is an actual contest for inventors to come up with an easier way to poop in space, basically. Okay. And they've got this this list of stipulations. I don't even know what specialty you'd have to say, you know what, I'm going to go into the workshop and
make a space toy
and get going on this. But they need to take it can take no more than 5 minutes to set up, and then it has to be able to divert waste from the body for up to 14 days. But there's all these other technical things, but this is an actual contest put out there and saying, and they need it to last for 144 hours. You be able to wear that thing and be able to remain clean. So inventors, I'm just saying, if you have any expertise in this particular area, you might be able to make some serious coin.
I wonder if that
Colleen looks very confused.
No, I'm just wondering if that would work. I have a friend who ended up getting his doctorate in biology, and he'd spent a lot of time in the ocean, marine biology, in a tiny little research sub that's, tethered to a larger ship. And there are no bathrooms on these things. So the guys would wear, just like a condom catheter, so they could pee. But the women were wearing, diapers because there's no place to pee on a research sub. They don't show that in the National Geographic, specials. There would be other places to use this than space, I would guess. If you could figure out it. I'm like, yeah.
Have your friend get a hold of that?
I'm just saying, it's not, it's not just space where you realize, where is someone peeing? You don't think about that when you're watching.
No, I don't want to usually. Actually, I'm all about the fact that, you're weightless and, you're eating food out of tubes. I don't want what happens after they eat the food.
Right.
I'm out. Have a really good trip. Get home safe, but leave that.
That's all there. If you're going to go to Mars, you got to figure out where to put everything.
Yeah.
I suppose they just, I don't know. I don't think they have airlocks, and you just chuck it out and have it that's going to be the first contact from someone is going to be the cube of poop. From another I take the tiniest little piece of information and I'll just go running with it. It's where my brain. This is why I don't watch horror films and crap like that, because I'll just take the little tiniest thing and just run it. Then I have nightmares. So I can take a nice, wonderful NASA thing and talk about poop in space.
And now we need to clean up our space. I'm worried now.
I know. I'm concerned. Do you guys know what Hygge is? Anybody ever heard of that? It's Hygge. It's the Danish concept of living simply, and it's a whole movement.
Well, I was thinking that is it a piece of furniture at IKEA?
I know. Not pretty smart. No, it's not. It's not that far off, but it's kind of been making the rounds of popularity and whatnot. But this article, and the writer is hysterical. I highly recommend when Miss Megan posts this, read this thing, because this writer just cracks me up. And I'm kind of picky about that kind of stuff. But the idea was that Hygge is ruining her sex life. And some of the highlights from this, she says, there's a dark side to living Danishly. And she's our sex went from almost every day to maybe once a week. And it's because onesies, slankets, curling up, eating carbs, and watching TV. It's all about that rather than going out and doing all this lavish stuff. So basically, they're getting too comfy, too fat, stretched fabrics, and fleecy dressing gowns not being aphrodisiacs. It's a riot. You've got to read this.
Not now. I'm too comfortable.
Yes. Yes. I mean, that, and she's just...
I'm going to have to use that one.
And she's super, super funny. The Danish ritual of relaxing and being cozy. And it's well, apparently that doesn't translate into sex. But they're just saying, too... elasticated waistbands are not prelude to athletic bonking.
Yeah, but Thanksgiving, they're necessary.
I know. Weird week to mention it. So PCD. This comes from, and this would be postcoital depression. Comes from a paper published in the Journal of Sexual Medicine this week, so it's kind of from a legit source. And it starts out with this article that it's been a long-held fact that women don't have that women are supposed to be left with, this big glow. But this particular study comes out and says that actually 46% of female university students in the study of 230 women do, in fact, experience this. The post-sex blues. And I don't know if it's simply because you're wondering if he's going to call. I'm not sure. Or she. I'm not. It doesn't really say. But they're trying to put it up there as, because they're saying that this is a condition that's been written off and been attributed largely only to men in the past. Have you heard that, Michael?
No.
I've never even heard the term.
Haven't you postcoital depression?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I know you found in the past 2 years, you rarely find something that I haven't ever crossed. But no, and so they're saying that okay. So in other words, it's accepted in men, and now they're finally realizing that it might happen in women too. So, yeah. So in other words, another disparity in the loveliness of any sort of health research.
Yes.
That's what that proves again. Is that once again, I mean, this is the one thing we were talking about a couple weeks ago with the birth control, the fact that they stopped the birth control stuff for guys because they had these side effects. And I'm like, really? Seriously? Yeah. I mean, maybe, I know that was 40 years ago and things were done differently and all this sort of stuff, but my Advil has worse side effects than this shit did. So I have no idea. That still annoys me.
I know. No, I'm with you. This one is kind of interesting. Although I did get my big skeptic on but you tell me if this raises your ire just a little bit. Okay, we all know that there's a pleasure center of the brain, that they've done all these studies and they show pictures that when you drugs, sex, stuff like that these pictures will light up and they can show that. So a group in University of Utah, got 19 Mormon teenagers to get... I can't even say it. Get stimulated by God's Spirit, okay? They said that Mormons experiencing religious ecstasy looked identical to non-Mormons that had been studied for pleasure centers for sex and drugs. Thoughts?
Doesn't seem unreasonable. Joy is joy. Mm-hmm. Doesn't make really difference where it's, where's emanating from.
See, I had so many questions. I mean, first of all, Mormons don't drink. And I'm like, okay, what if, you know what I mean? I'm not sure if that was an accurate sample or not.
Well, it's only 19, but you have to go through there. But if you're talking about all the variety of ways that your brain can be happy, why wouldn't thinking about the joy that your religion brings you do the same thing?
Well, they believe, even though it was a very small study with only 19 participants, I mean, and they did look at a lot. If you read the article, which we'll post it, they looked at a lot of scenarios and family situations and all sorts of different things that Mormons are kind of famous for being into. And they did put them through quite a bit of paces, and they proved this theory all the way through. So, I mean, if you can, and I am not a scientist, you guys probably have way more understanding of, how to debunk a study than I would, but I just wasn't sure. I mean, do you guys have any immediate thoughts on that, or does that seem like just a tiny group to you?
I mean, that definitely seems like a very small sample. I guess I could see how that would be, though. I mean, I studied a little art history in college, and there was what's that sculpture of like the ecstasy of Saint Teresa, and it's supposed to be like she's feeling God's love, but she's basically like having an orgasm. Like she has a total O face, and like my professor told this, so I mean. Wow. It was, but yeah, she was experiencing that same ecstasy that you would through sex, but only through God. So I think I could believe it.
They probably experienced it better than us because we, drinking and everything else. They're just more pure.
And I thought, on one hand, well, they're either perfect samples because they don't drink, right. or it's skewed. I couldn't really make up my mind, but it did not escape my purview. And I think we've kind of run out of time. So we'll talk about kids walking out on sex, and then next week too, there's another interesting story about. Sex rules ruining sex. So we've got sexual promoters and sexual distancers. We'll talk about those people next week.
So I have to find out why I'm right next week?
Oh, no.
See, this is
sorry.
Pouty face?
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. I cannot take this away from you.
Clean's been right all along.
When someone says you're right, I want to know
when
what
it makes
the hell
it
I'm right
outline.
about.
Well,
it's official.
Chelsea's about to get validated too then, because she kind of brought this up. Okay, so this is funny. It's an article about kids walking in on sex. there's some really funny stories about what they've said, which I love reading that crap. I'm like, this one was one of my best. Daddy was doing push-ups on mommy. And so, but they're talking about, what to do, how to handle it, how the different age groups respond and all of that. But the sexologist quoted in the article, Jess O'Reilly is her name, says, look, at the end of the day, boundaries are important, but the better sex education and the more realistic terms are used when talking about it, the less traumatic watching your parents get it on will be. So there you are.
Yeah, I really hate euphemisms sometimes. It's fun to joke about them, but I'm like, use the proper terms, use the proper words, do it in an appropriate way. You don't need to give a 6-year-old a completely, history of, sex education. Yeah, that was sex.
Yeah, but they should know what their body parts
parts
are.
are.
Yeah, you can be accurate
and
honest, but be age appropriate too.
And then you pause and you wait for the next question. And then, because they might go, okay, that's fine. And then they go play with their Legos. Exactly. People
you don't have to TMI it.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they ask another question, you answer exactly what was asked.
They're smarter than I think we give them credit for.
Oh, yeah, they're I've seen it in my daughter and her friends. They're they're teenagers now, and they are a very smart, engaged group. And they may not be the biggest talkers sometimes, but they know what the hell's going on.
Well, and
sort of scares me, but it's really cool at the same time.
Well, I loved it too when they talked about, just make sure too, you always kind of keep a little mention that sex is part of a healthy relationship. But I did like this. This was regarding older kids. And she said, think about humorous things and maybe pack up some of these in case you need to call on one of them. But she said something like, hey, aren't you glad we still like each other enough to do this? So, I mean, which, at the end of the day, that's not really a bad thing. And a kid at that age could grasp that, right?
Yeah, they definitely could. Yeah, because it's, it's normal, and healthy and I hate to say this word, but ordinary. Sometimes it's ordinary is good. This is not, it's not this, putting this large glass case around something. It's like, no, don't touch. Healthy people do this, and we're healthy people.
Exactly.
Yes. Absolutely. Well, guys, you sent Chelsea and Zack from the Minnesota AIDS Project. You sent over quite a list of the things as community educators for MAP that you are able to talk about, and we didn't hit the whole list, of course. And we'd love to have you back again. Are you willing to? Did we scare you away? Or are you coming back?
No, we'd love to come back.
Love it, yeah.
Well, let's get you back in the first quarter of next year. And any final thoughts, guys?
No, well, we've got to take a look at the newsletter. We've got Rabbit Vibes as the product of the month coming up in December. We've got baskets you can win. Megan's going to be putting out how you can head over to social media and share away. They're really fun. They're really fun. Tara put together some really fun baskets.
Did she?
Yeah. And I just really thank you so much. And I was really, really glad that you guys said, yes, we'll take your money. And
We love
I'm really
money.
very, very, thank you very much for coming here today.
And the website, guys, to be contacted for any possible services that people might want or need?
mnaidesproject.org, I believe it is. Yep.
Correct.
And you can also call us on the AIDS line. It's 1-800-248-2437, otherwise 248-AIDS. Or I'm just going to let you all in on a little secret.
Okay.
It works out to being 1-800-BITCHES. So,
We get a lot of prank calls.
but
prank
people
calls.
remember that.
I like it. Well,
Messing around and they're going, oh my God.
I still think that every time I have to call work, I'm like, what's the number? Oh, that's what it is. B-I-T.
oh my God. Thanks to Zack and Chelsea. Michael, good to have you back.
It's
Coming
great
in
being
soon.
back.
And Miss Colleen, you and I will be back at it. We're in December. Can you believe it?
December. It's just insane. Well, I'm perfectly willing to say goodbye to 2016.
Bye-bye.
Bye.